And the truth is, I see from the oilam over here that nothing scares you guys. What do I mean nothing scares you guys? Because over here, no less than Tosfos in Sukkah, on Daf Lamed Tes, Tosfos says that a misper ladinim, Tosfos is going in the halacha of not being moiser to an amoritz from the Peres Shvius. And Tosfos says that no less than a Tosfos. Why can't you buy a Paris to an Amaretz? Because ein misper ladinim. There's no number to the amount of halachas ulisurim and isurim sheyesh bePeres Shvius. There's so many isurim, we don't even have a number for the amount of isurim and halachas and anhagas that you're supposed to be noyig in the Peres Shvius. Shetzarich lid noyig be'em kedusha Shvius. Tosfos says this in Dibla Maskal She'ein, where he talks about that. This is the reason why you can't be moiser the Peres Shvius to an Amaretz. It can't be moiser money to an Amaretz. It had to do Kedushas Peres Shvius on it. And I see over here that the oilam, this is the oilam of Talmidei Chachamim. So the oilam over here wants to know, what are the halachas of Peres Shvius? That's going to be in Mit Hashem today, the sugya dekala, Peres Shvius, and the issue to be mafsid the Peres Shvius. And if Tosfos already warns us that there's no misper to the dinim, so that means we have a very big agenda, and we already lost about 5 minutes over here. So let's try and make it up as Hashem, and try to get through the halachas of the dinei of Peres Shvius, how you're supposed to be noyig with kedusha Shvius, what you're allowed to do with the Peres, legabe the isser of selling the Peres, legabe the isser of being mafsid them and using them for things that are not roi for kedushasam. So let's try to see what we have here. The truth is that it starts already in the Torah Kadesha. The pasuk says, "V'hoisa Shabbos ha'oretz lechem le'ochla." The pasuk in Vayikra, Perek Ravei, pasuk Vav, it says, "V'hoisa Shabbos ha'oretz lechem le'ochla." V'darshu chachmeinu lechem lekol tzarchechem. This is the Gemara in Baba Kama Daf Kuf Beis. You're allowed to use it for all of your needs, but le'ochla v'loy lehefsid. You're not allowed to be mafsid the Peres Shvius. And from here, the Chazal teach us that Peres Shvius were given for the normal usage, for eating, for drinking, even for shmearing, that's for sure. Hadlakas haner, a person wants to light neiris, the normal usages, the usages that are hanasam ubiuran shava, that the hana comes at the same time when they're being ruined or destroyed. For example, if a person wants to take a lemon from a kedusha shvius and he wants to put it on a stain, he has a stain on his jacket and he wants to put the lemon, they say lemon takes off the stain. So that's not hana ubiurim shava. The hana comes when you're going to wear the garment later on, and the biurim is right now. You can only do it l'achla in the shimush, that is the normal derech of the shimush, and that the hana and the destruction comes miyad. And today we're going to try to figure out what's called the normal derech usage of the fruits of Peres Shvius. Am I allowed to take an apple and squeeze it into apple juice? Is that a normal shemesh? Is that called, I was mekalkal, I ruined the pri? It used to be a pri, and now you see it's a different bracha. That's an interesting shaila. I like that shaila. Also, you're going to be allowed to drink it, but in every situation, are you going to be allowed to turn it into a different product? What about raw foods? Am I allowed to cook them? What about things that are supposed to be eaten cooked? Am I allowed to eat them raw? If you have types of things that grow from the ground, such as wood, trees, etc., that grow from the ground, if it's oimid for b'niyah of batim, of making houses, wood, or making chairs, etc., or etc., something maybe like paints, etc., so then they don't have kedusha shvius at all. And this is the reason why, if a person wants to know, if you have plants and things like that, and you want to know, are you allowed to cut them and bring them into the house? So you might have a different shaila of the avodas karka, and in certain situations, you're not allowed to work the land. But the actual product, if it doesn't have a taste and it doesn't have a smell, and it's not used for its taste and it's not used for its smell, regular flowers, so then there's no kedusha shvius. A person buys flowers for Shabbos, so then he's allowed to buy them because there's no kedusha shvius. And after he finishes with them, he's going to be allowed to throw them out. Those are all the things we're not talking about. Now, that doesn't get involved if somebody who's not following the laws of Shmitta and he decides to work the land. There could be other issues involved. You might not be allowed to buy those products such as flowers, such as wood, etc., that were planted during Shvius and that were done be'isser. That's a separate topic. What we're talking today about is which products have Kedusha Shvius, and when the product has Kedusha Shvius, what are the dinim that go into being Kedusha Shvius? What am I allowed to do with such a product? So all we mentioned now is that foods you're going to be allowed to eat, you're going to be allowed to drink, but you're not going to be allowed to ruin them. So we have to discuss ruin. And we're discussing dafka, things that have kedusha shvius on them, but flowers that have no smell or wood from a tree, that doesn't have a din of kedusha shvius. It doesn't go into the paris of v'hoisa Shabbos ha'aretz lachem la'achla, things that you can be oichel. So without further ado, let's try to get right into the sugya. The truth is, if I'm not mistaken, the Olam already saw the Ramban in Sefer HaMitzvahs and Mitzvah Hashem. We're going to talk about peels, Bez Hashem. We're going to talk about that. The Olam, if I'm not mistaken, saw the Ramban in the Sefer HaMitzvahs. And over there, the Ramban seems to have a shita that there's even a mitzvah to eat the Peres Shvius this year. Part of the Kedusha says, eat these heilige frucht, eat these heilige fruit. And that's the Chita seemingly of the Ramban. The Megillas Esther has many questions on that. And that's what prompted the Chazain Ish, whose yahrzeit is, at least right now in Eretz Yisrael, it's now. Now you guys, it's not till later, but the yahrzeit of the Chazain Ish is right now. As we speak, the Torahs of the Chazain Ish in Perek Yudalid, in Siman Yudalid, in Ois Yud, the Chazain Ish says that's not pshat in the Ramban. Even the Ramban never meant to say that Peres Shvius, there's a mitzvah to eat the Peres Shvius. Either Ramban says there's a mitzvah, so he says, the Chazain Ish, it just means that there's an Isser Asay to ruin the Peres of Shvius. And therefore, if a person were to ruin the Peres and not eat them, he's over on the Isser Asay, the Isser Asay of Lo'achlo, that you're supposed to be using them for their purpose, their tachlis, and you're not supposed to be ruining it and taking it away from its tachlis. So therefore, there is no isser. There is no mitzvah to be eating peres shvius. But look, what I tell you by saying, there's certainly a mitzvah to eat the peri and have the hanoya that no isser was done with this pri. That's maybe, but not the mitzvah, not a mitzvah deraisa, or even bisman hazeh mitzvah derabanan of l'achla. But we have to discuss today the Isra Asay, the Lo'achla, the Lo'ila Hefsid. What's called Hefsid and what's called Kilkel in the Parsha of Shvius, in the Parsha of Shmitta. So I guess we'll break it up into different shilas. The first shilah, what we'll talk about, is the shilah of Shchita. And the truth is, if there's time, Rabbi Isai, I want to get also to the other sugya, and that's the sugya of Schayra, that you're not allowed to sell Peres Shvius either. You're not allowed to sell them. There's an esrog to sell, which makes it a big shilah. How are you going to buy an esrog next year? How are you going to buy maybe even adasim? Adasim have a smell. A lulav doesn't have a smell, and a lulav doesn't have a taste. So that's not going to be a problem of kedusha shvius. But how are you going to buy them? And am I going to have to noig with them certain types of kedusha after I finish with my esrog? Can I make my esrog into jam afterward, into jelly afterward? If there's time, Bez Hashem, so then we'll talk about that. Mitzvah Hashem. Now, the Maisa, the first shayla we'll talk about will be Rabbi Isai, Schitas Peres. What's the halacha in Shvius? Are you allowed to squeeze fruits? And today, Rabbi Isai, you can't walk 5 minutes and you can't walk 5 steps in Yerushalayim without seeing some juicing store, etc., etc. And that, Rabbi Isai, is taka, a very big shayla. Today, during Shvius, are you going to be allowed to juice apples? Are you allowed to juice orange juice? Are you allowed to squeeze oranges into orange juice? Is that cool that you're ruining the orange by squeezing the orange into a juice? Is that cool that you're ruining the orange? It's not la'achla, it's left. And now you're going to say, come on, I'm drinking it afterward. But Rabbi say, we know in halacha that when something was in the form of an oichel and now you made it into a mashke, you changed it. So what's the halacha? Are you allowed to take an apple, an orange, grapes, olives, all these things and squeeze them? Or is that considered a hefsid? So this Rabbi say, you look over here in the Rambam, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, we have our Mamakaimis on the Rambam. The Rambam in Perek in Hilchos Shmitta Yovel Gimel. The Rambam says like this: "V'leishana Peres mibriyasa." The Rambam tells us already.
If we can, excuse me a second, we're going to put up Mamakaimis for Kallus. Go
ahead. The Rambam says in Perek Hilchos Shmitta Yovel Gimel. He says, "V'leishana Peres mibriyasa." You're not supposed to take the pri and change it from its natural form. Kiderech, just like Truma Umaisa. Now, the Rambam already told us a very big aside. The Rambam told us that the dinim of how I'm supposed to be treating the Peres Shvius are going to be the same dinim of how I'm going to be treating Trumas, Maisvis. So you're going to have to look a lot of times in Hilchos Trumas and Maisvis to know what was allowed to do with Peres that are Trumas and Maisvis. And from there, I'm going to know what I'm going to be allowed to do with Peres of Shvius. But the Rambam says, don't take a pri and change it from its original form. The Rambam goes on, if it's a derech to eat the thing raw, for example, it's probably a normal thing to eat a radish raw. I don't think they cook radishes. So then that's called that you ruined it. If you take a radish and eat it raw, you did what you're supposed to do. If you cooked it, you ruined it. You don't have a right to ruin it, even though you like radishes and you're going to eat it. Doesn't matter. You were over on l'ochla v'loy lehefsid. You're over on the Yisra say. A potato is the derech to eat it cooked. If you go and eat a potato raw, you ruin the potato. The potato, and this is banned by Trumas, and this is banned by Shmitta. A potato that is grown in Eretz Israel in the 7th year, you have to eat it in its natural way, in the normal way. So by eating it and not bringing it to its tachlis of being a cooked potato, so what you're doing is you're not doing the maximum of what you could be doing with this potato. So that's called you ruined the potato, says the Heilige Rambam. He says, the same thing, animals, they don't need you to cook their food. And therefore, you're not allowed to cook the food for the animal because that's called you ruined it when it's an animal food. So besides, this became a Baisai, but Grace of Shaila, what's the pshat in this Heilige Rambam? The Rambam seems to say that you're not allowed to change a fruit to a different form. What does it mean to change the fruit to a different form? The Rambam says, Lo yishana mibriyasan. So the emes is that there's two ways to understand the Rambam, Rabbi Yisai. One way you can understand is that the Rambam is saying that you can't take the solid and turn it into a liquid. Why would I not be able to take a solid and turn it into a liquid? So we all know over here that the Gemara in Brachos talks about when you take a fruit and you squeeze the fruit, it changes the bracha. Why does it knock down from a boyer priya eitz to a shahakol, which is obviously a less specific bracha and shows us that it lost the chshivas of being a priya eitz? So the Gemara says in Brachos, the Gemara and the Mishnah and Orla talk about this, is that that's called zeya ba'alma. That's not called the etzim apri. That's called the tam of the pri, the zeya of the pri, the schwitz of the pri. And in halacha, at least certainly in Hilchos Brachos, that's called that you ruined the pri. You took a pri, you took an apple. We all know you take an apple, you squeeze an apple, you make on it a shackle and a mitzvah on the juice. Why do you make a shackle on the juice? Because you just ruined the pri. It's no longer a pri. So maybe we could learn like that, and the feed that it would come out that if I take an apple and I make it into apple juice, just like I knocked down the bracha and turned her into a shahakol, so then who I did, it's also klapi shvius, not considered the pri anymore. So that's called that you didn't ochel the pri. That's called you ruined the pri. It's true, you have a benefit in the apple juice, and it's true the apple juice still has kedusha shvius, and it's true also that now that you did it, you could drink the apple juice, but maybe you ruined it and you were over on the aveira. That was the grace of Shaila, and you should know, I'm being asked over here, wine and grapes, why would they be better? But that's because the Gemara says wine and grapes, wine from grapes and olive from olive oil from olives is the tachlis of the olive. The halakha b'shafin and olives themselves, they make you forget. The tachlis of the olive is the oil. The tachlis of the grape is the grape juice. And in halacha, it has a shame not of zayah. The Gemara says that it has a shame of a mashke. And in halacha, more so, what's the bracha that a person makes on a grape? He doesn't make a shahak on a grape juice. He doesn't make a shahakol. Fakarti makes an even better bracha. What's the bracha you make on oil? So technically, when you drink oil, oil is mazik. So you don't make a bracha on oil. And as a matter of fact, during the Shmitta year, if you drink oil, that might be ruining the oil because you're not using the oil in a normal fashion. But let's say you do some type of a mixture which has roiv, olive oil, and meat of a different product. So then generally the bracha on that would be a boirei priya eitz because you didn't knock down the bracha of an olive. You didn't knock it down. It remains the chshivas of the pri because the pri is when somebody looks at an olive and he has a Torah dika eigen. And not only a Torah dika eigen, but even in the goyishkeit, he understands the tachlis of an olive is for the oil. So therefore it doesn't get knocked down from the bracha of a boirei priya eitz. And that's that. Thank you very much. That's what it's called, a nista, a das. But al kapanim, that's considered a nigron. I think also different things the Gemara in the Shulchan Aruch talks about in Siman Reish Beis, etc. But all of these things are based. I show you that the olive is tachlis to be olive oil, and the grape is tachlis to be grape juice. So that's for sure not called ruining. Adrabah, one could go and ask a funny question. Maybe I shouldn't be allowed to eat a grape or an olive because the tachlis is that. Okay, that far we don't say. But we want to know, what about all the other fruits? What about all the other fruits? What about apples and oranges and whatnot? So Harei L'chayra says the Chazain Ish, and this is again on his yard site. You're going to be hearing his name a lot tonight in Chavei Lamed Beis in Hilchos Shmitta, and also he talks about this bein in Hilchos Brachos, and even in Hilchos Shabbos. He says, well, let's talk first about oranges, says the Chazon Ish. Can I take an orange and squeeze an orange into orange juice? So you have to know, this Chazon Ish is an unbelievable chiddush, the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish has a chiddush where he tells you, when you take an orange and squeeze it into orange juice, he says, I think even in Hilchos Brachos, it might still remain a Bari Priya Eitz. And there are people till today that are actually nayig like that. They make a Bari Priya Eitz on orange juice. What's the idea? Why would you make a Bari Priya Eitz? Now, when you read the Chazon Ish has two tzadim. One side that the Chazon Ish has is he says, since roiv of the oranges are used for it, there's a machlekes between the Rosh and the Rashba, which is a little too difficult to go into right now. Could be we spoke about it when we learned Hilchos Shmitta, maybe in Hilchos Brachos we spoke about it. But since there's a machlekes between the Rosh and the Rashba in Hilchos Brachos, it's a good trivia question. Where do you have the Rosh and the Rashba's name brought in Shulchan Aruch? You have it in two places, in the Reish Beis and also in Reish A. Over there, those simanim talk about squeezing fruits. And over there, there's a shita that holds that if roiv of the fruits are taka used for the purpose of their liquid, so then it's not called that you ruined it, and you would make taka a Bari Priya Eitz. And the Chazon Ish is very chayshish for that tzad. Chazon Ish has a tzad that maybe everyone agrees. So Ibazai, if that's the case, says the Chazon Ish, by Shmita, it's going to be the same thing. Since roiv of the oranges are used for this purpose, and we could all get involved if roiv oranges, or do we look at roiv juicing oranges, etc. But the idea first. So the Chazon Ish says, if roiv is used for that, then it's called that's the tachlis of the pri. If roiv of this thing, when I see it on the tree growing in orange, I see the purpose is for the juice, because that's what roiv people do with it. That's one side, said the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish has another side that he says oranges are different, because when you squeeze the orange, the whole ganze kishkes geht to charai. Said the Chazon Ish, say bezai, why call that schita? You could call that, says the Chazon Ish, a sugya in brachas called shrima. When I smash up an orange or I smash up something, the Iker Shita holds that it still retains its bracha. Certainly if you see pieces, and therefore the Chazon Ish has a very big side in Hilchos Brachos that on orange juice, you actually make a Bari Priya Eitz. But the Chazon Ish in Shmitta said because of this, therefore it's considered not ruination of the pri, and therefore you could do it during the Shmita year. You could squeeze oranges and you can make oranges. Now, the truth is, if you're listening with a good ear, this is an unbelievable chiddush. That means me and you, I think everybody here, makes a shahakal on orange juice. So we're not going to be allowed to squeeze oranges during the year of Shmita. Are we not going to be allowed to squeeze oranges? Because, hooray, we don't have okay, it's true, we have the whole entire oranges in there. We have that svara. But you see, obviously, that we consider the juice to be zeya ba'alma. We consider it not to be the ikar pri. Sharei, we make a sha'akal, we don't make a Bari Priya Eitz. And this you should know, Rabbi Yisai, the Or L'Tzion, for the Svardim, he argues on the Chazon Ish. He says only grapes, only olives, everything else is considered zeya ba'alma, and you're not allowed to do it during the Shemitah year. He holds you're not allowed to squeeze oranges, and if oranges, certainly apples, and certainly all the fruits, you're not going to be allowed to squeeze during the Shemitah year. If you did, you could drink it, and you still have to be noig b'kedusha. But he says you're not allowed to do it, and it's interesting. That shita we sort of understand because we make a shahakal, Rabbi Yisai. So if we make a shahakal, he says, look, that's the Rambam. The Rambam says, lo yishana peres mi briyasan. So he says, haraya, it's in the shtana mi briyasan because you make a shahakal on the orange juice, on the apple juice. So then it's called a shinoi. So he says, when it comes to Shmita, you're not allowed to make it into orange juice this year. And the Chazon Ish taka, to a certain extent, it stems. It's just that the Chazon Ish held that oranges are going to be considered, since the roiv are like that and the whole pulp is in there and everything, so he makes a Bari Priya Eitz. But you and me, then we make a shackle, are we going to have to do like the Or L'Tzion? So you have to know, Rabbi Yisai, that I think most of the Gedolei Olam were choilek on this. Most of the Gedolei Olam held that everything is totally in derech. What's the norm that a person does in order to be kaveya and establish if this is called a kilkel? It's true. In Hilchos Brachos, it's considered zeya, because that's not the pri. And Hilchos Brachos depends on the words boire priya eitz. I can't say pri. This is not the pri. But Masha'enke in Hilchos Shmita is not totally if the pri is here, and they learn the Rambam differently. They learn, it's true the Rambam says lo yishana peres mi briyasan, but that the Rambam meant in the same vein, which is the continuation of the sentence. The Rambam goes on to say, don't go and eat a raw potato, because that's called shinui from its purpose, from its function, from its tachlis. So they learn it's the same thing here. Lo yishana mibriyasa means in a way where it's considered a kilkel. But if it's a normal derech, and I don't even know if derech means right. Derech means if somebody sees you doing this, is that considered, he looks at you, that you're ruining the item. So then Rabbi Isai, you'd be allowed to do it during the Shmitta year. This has other nafkaminas, Rabbi Isai, like I'm being asked over here, carrot juice, for example. So let's go from Kala to Kovid. I think everyone agrees orange juice is for sure a normal derech. So now we have a few svaras we could be making, certainly to make the orange juice, either like the chazanish, or because the actual pulp is in there, or even without the chazanish, because it's derech, even if it won't be roiv. Kal v'chomer that it's roiv. That probably takes care of why you'd be allowed to make also grapefruit juice. The question is, as we go down the pole over here, carrot juice, definitely in Yerushalayim, has become a lot more popular. I don't know if it's reached yet American soil. I'm not sure if Columbus brought it. But Akopanim over here, carrot juice is very common. I remember when I came in Shmitta, this is about 3 Shmittas ago, they were saying you can't make carrot juice. That's what they were saying 3 Shmittas ago, because that was a real ruination. Number one, it wasn't the derech. Number two, don't forget, after I squeeze it, all that pulp, all that carrot stuff, you throw in the garbage. So you're mamish ruining it. That was 3 Shmittas ago. But today, Rabbi Isai, there's no shaila to the derech. I saw one paper that came out which gave a lot of the klalim of what things you're allowed to squeeze. And one of the things he writes over there, it's like a chart. And it talks, let's say, about this, that, and etc. And I realized that the chart that he has is the same chart from last time, and that you can't do, Rabbi Isai, because a lot of people during Corona were very bored, and they bought ninjas and all other types of things to squeeze in this and that. And Rabbi Isai, they're squeezing a lot of stuff today, melons and dust. Now, I don't know 100% what's the derech, but it's clearly going to be a lot more liberal. I mean, I don't like saying that word, but you know what I mean. It's clearly going to be a lot more liberal than the Shmitta, the previous Shmitta, and certainly 2 Shmittas ago. So if 7 Shmittas ago, they laughed at people that were making apple juice. Today, we all understand you're clearly going to be allowed to make apple juice according to this mahalich of, let's say, Rosh Shlomo Zalman, Rav Elyashiv, Rav Vosner. Rav Vosner writes, whatever's derech is allowed. What goes into derech, we can fight about it. It depends on the place. It depends on the time. Obviously, these questions are going to be in Eretz Yisrael. So we're going to have to figure out what's the derech in Eretz Yisrael. I don't know if it means if you go to a juicing store and those guys juice everything, Rabbi Isai. You go in there, they could be juicing onions, they could be juicing tables, they could be juicing schnitzel, whatever they have, they're going to juice. That's not a raya. It has to be something that's considered a derech. So that, Rabbi Isai, I would consider that's the first shaila we have over here. This has ramifications, Rabbi Isai, in Hilchos Shabbos also. We know that to squeeze a grape on Shabbos or to squeeze an olive on Shabbos is an issa deraisa. What about squeezing an orange? Lefi the chazanish, maybe, because when you squeeze something that has a shame of a mashka, so that's an issa deraisa. Maybe an orange, according to chazanish, maybe that's an issa deraisa. Maybe if today roiv oranges are used for that purpose, maybe for sure deraisa. Maybe it's totally what's called zaya. So if you're a benzion, maybe not. And now we have to don carrots. I don't think it became a roiv. So maybe it'll still remain only a yisra abundant to squeeze a carrot out for its juice. Not our sin. But that Rabbi Isai is shaila number 1. Now the truth is, there's other, there's other issues over here, which I won't go into out of sight because I want to don different shilas. Very good. Lemons will be a very similar shaila. But Lemaisa, I don't want to go out of sight. I just mentioned there's one topic also within this topic, which is grinding up items. You're only going to be allowed to grind and to mash something that's the derech to mash. For example, it's certainly the derech to mash, to make applesauce, and certainly it's the derech to mash up potatoes, and it's certainly the derech to mash avocado, and it's certainly the derech to mash up tomatoes and to make it into tomato paste, etc. And that's for sure going to be mutter. Anything that's not the derech to mash, you're not going to be allowed to mash. If you have a banana, so for an adult, it's not the derech to mash. But if you're doing it for a child, it's going to be mutter, I once heard from Rav Elyashiv, because it's a derech for a child, so that's not called you're ruining it. You're going to certainly be allowed to cut things up into very small pieces because a person eats things like that. So that'll be allowed. But you're going to always have to try and figure out, is what I'm doing the derech, is it normal? I like that. Peanuts for peanut butter. L'chayr, yeah. L'chayr nachanami. It happens to be, once you're mentioning it, I got from Rabbi Frati the other day. He gave me this paper which tells me which things peanuts Yeah, so peanuts, taka. I was just looking to see there are some things that don't come in Eretz Yisrael. Peanuts do come from Eretz Yisrael. So Hanami, it's a very good point. You'll be allowed to take peanuts and make them into peanut butter because that's certainly normal. Peels we're going to get to in a moment. That I'm going to spend a little bit more time on. Peels. You know what? Let's see if the Olam wants peels. I want the Olam to be happy. So let's talk about peels. That's Hashem. So it's like this. Excuse me. Now, don't forget, Rabbi Isai, if you have certain sfeikis, like there are some foods which aren't going to be clear if you're allowed to squeeze them. It's not going to be clear what's the derech. It's not going to be clear certain foods to mash, to not mash. I think pomegranate juice is a common thing to squeeze, and therefore I think it is the derech. But if you're going to have a case where you're not going to be clear, don't forget, we might be able to be mitzaref certain svaras. For example, let's say you go into a badatz juicing store. Now, the Badats, where are they getting their products from? From Yevol Nachri, from Goyim. And I said last time that it's Kedai to be Machmir. Rav Yashiv HaKopanim held it's Kedai to be Machmir, to be noig with them Kedusha. And I explained last time that you could buy it from them because the Isser of selling is only on the seller. They hold it to mutter, so for you, it's no problem to buy. So now you want to know, are you allowed to tell them to juice? You're telling them to juice something which is, let's say, not so clear if it's considered a derech or not. You know, let's say you have something, it's hard to say. I think cucumbers is clear that it's not the derech. I think carrots is clear that today it is the derech, but you found something which is not so clear. Let's say melons. I don't know if it's so clear to juice melons. So you're not sure. But now don't forget, first of all, maybe it is derech, and therefore it's anyways mutter to juice it. Number two, maybe the Yevul Nachri stuff doesn't have Kedusha. There's a whole segment of Klal Yisrael that holds like that. Same thing with stuff that comes from the Rava. Maybe it's not Kedusha Shvius at all. And even if it's Kedusha Shvius, maybe what you're doing is not a problem because it's considered a normal way of usage. So you might be able, Rabbi Isai, to be mitzvah of certain sfeikis that we spoke about. The next topic, Rabbi Isai, is klipis. I'm hearing over here klipis. I'm thinking like in Tikunei Zoyar over here. No, we're not talking about those klipis. We're talking about pasha, the shells, excuse me, shells and peels, etc. What's the dinim of peels when it comes to Hilchos Shmitta? Do I have to be noyig those with kedusha? Now, what would be the nafkamina about being noyig? And it's also like if I'm being noyig the peels with kedusha shvius, do I have to be noyig kedusha shvius? What would that mean? So it's going to be two shilos. One shiloh we're going to have is that when I finish with my thing, I have the peel, can I just throw it in the garbage? Or, no, I'm going to have to wrap it up and then put it in the garbage, or I'm going to have to put it in a special Shmitta pach, etc. So what's the din of peels? Another shiloh by side is, let's say it's a type of fruit or vegetable that's not the derech to peel. Am I allowed to peel it? Because now I'm ruining it. For example, if I take a tomato, then I peel the outside shell. What did I just do? I just took food, which you would have eaten, and now I made it into garbage. Nobody's going to eat that. So you did something which is called ruining it. So you cannot peel something which is not the derech to peel. Now you're all going to right away be nervous. What about on Pesach? So Rav Hosner said for those that have the minhag that they peel everything, including tomatoes, I'm still yet to figure out how you can do that. But if they actually do it, so Rav Hosner said that's their minhag. That's not called ruining. On it's a big chiddush because you could have heard who says we look at 8 days. Maybe we look at the whole entire year. But Rav Hosner said for those that have the minhag, I guess they could be saying Rav Hosner. If they have a minhag that they peel, that's not called they're ruining it. That's called the only way they can eat it during these days. I find that to be an incredible kula. Number one is maybe we should look at the rest of the year. And number two is that even now, Roiv Klal Yisrael doesn't peel tomatoes. So why should I say that because you have a problem that you can't eat the tomato, that becomes a derech achila? I find that to be a tremendous kula, but Rav Hosner is Rav Hosner. And anybody got the Chasidish minhag, I guess he could be saying Rav Hosner. But we want to dive now, what's the din of klipis in general? Do you have to be noyig with your banana peels and your apple peels and your cucumber peels with kedusha? So the truth is, I think it's pashut. Everyone realizes that an apple peel and a cucumber peel, for sure you're going to have to be noyig with kedusha. I might let you do it. I might let you peel it because it's the normal thing to peel. And once it's normal derech of the usage of that product, it's not called you ruined it, but everyone understands that an apple peel is edible and a cucumber peel is edible. So therefore, you would have to be noyig kedusha and put it in the Shmitta bach or wrap it up in a bag, etc., if you would have peres shvius. But let's say we're dealing with types of peels, which are not edible. So the Rambam, again, you go to a Rambam. The Heilige Rambam tells us in Perek Hey, in Halacha Chof Aleph, Beklipas ein kedusha shvius. He says in Klipas there's no kedusha shvius. Now, if you look good in the Rambam, you could make a mistake. You have to remember what the Rambam told us. The Rambam told us that when you want to know the laws of Shmita, go back and see what I wrote in Trumas and Maasros. So when you read this Rambam, it sounds like all peels don't have kedusha shvius. But that's not true. The Rambam says in Trumas and Maasros, in Perek Aleph, in Halacha Yud, that a klipa that's right to eat, even al yedei chak, if you have a klipa which is edible, even al yedei chak, the Heilige Rambam says, avada, it still has kedushas truma, and it still has kedushas shvius, etc., etc. Not only that, if you have a klipa that's right for a Michael behema, so the Rambam tells us also in Perek Hey, in Hilchos Shmita, in Halacha Gimel, that Michael behema has kedushas shvius. So if you have a peel which is right for Michael behema, so then that's a vada, something that you have to be noyig with kedushas shvius. Now, lefi this, it's going to be very hard to find out which peels are roy. In other words, let's go in order. If you know that you have a peel, which is roy la'achilas adam, for sure be noig b'kedusha. If you know you have a peel, which is roy la'beima, for sure be noig b'kedusha. Sometimes it gets a little bit difficult. Like, for example, I think everyone understands that carrot peels and apple peels for sure have kedusha shvius, and you can't just throw them in the garbage. And I think tepuach adama, potato peel, I think everyone's been to a zoo and see animals eat the ganze potato with the peel, and they love the stuff. So then, versteht sich, that also would have kedusha shvius, l'chayra. An orange peel, I think for sure has kedusha shvius, because some people eat them. What's it called? When I was growing up, they had that stuff that I didn't like. What's it called? Marmalade. I think people eat orange, chocolate-covered orange peels. So for sure, people eat them. So for sure, l'chayra, they have kedusha shvius, right? L'chayra. If you have klipis that still have on them a nice chunk anyways of the fruit, even let's say you have a banana, and on the bottom of the banana, there's a lot of banana left. So then anyways, you have to be shomer it because of the food, right? For sure, the food itself. So basically, sometimes it is going to be difficult to know. I don't know what, I went to the zoo last Friday to try and find what the animals are eating, right? It's a little bit difficult because, you get a little bit too close and you're not coming home. So it was a little bit difficult to see exactly what these guys eat. I must tell you, I don't really know what banana peels. I don't really know a lot of the peels. And I would just say that on most of the peels, I'm going to tell my wife, so if you have sfeikis, we mentioned before, maybe you could add the sfeikis. I'm just going to tell my wife, just wrap it. You find a bisley bag inside the garbage and throw it in the bisley bag and then throw it in the garbage. Or put it in the, what's it called? Or put it inside the Shmitta pach, if you have a Shmitta pach. It's true, I should spend more time with the zookeeper and I'm a makabel the muser. Let me get invited. So that's what I'm saying. Is l'chayra, that's another big yisayid. The klipis. The next big yisayid, which I want to talk about, is now we know that the very important yisayid, we know in Kol Kula that there's a concept of blias. If you have a fruit that is treif, it's orla, it has blias. It gives off its blias. You cook an orla apple together with other things, then the rest of the food becomes treif also if it's not batal b'shishin. We know by svichim, if you have treif, for example, it's mamish, they're working the land in Eretz Yisrael, chas v'chalila. So you have a cucumber that grows, or you have a zucchini that grows, and now you cook it into a pot. The pot is treif. Everything that's in the pot that was cooked there, the chicken is treif. It's all treif. The oven can be treif. I call treif. Blias. What is the din of kedusha shvius peiros? Do they give off blias? Are there kodesh blias? Hey, like a blias. Hey, like a blias. So the truth is very interesting. There was a fight. There's a big machlekes. The gabe blias once they get into the pot. There are many poskim, and this is how I'm like to paskin, for example, from my rebbes, from Rav Yashiv and other great gedolim, that they hold in a pot. Once they get into a pot, that means I think something was, my potato is kodesh kedusha shvius, and I cook it in a pot. The pot itself doesn't give off blias. If you took svichim and you cook that zucchini we spoke about, that goes into the pot, and then you cook something in the pot within 24 hours, it's not kosher. But if you take an apple that was kedusha shvius and you cook it, I think it's normal to cook apples. You make kompot and whatever. It's not ruining it. Or you take a potato and you cook it into a pot. The pot doesn't become kedusha shvius. And if you cook something now with that, the chicken doesn't become Kedusha Shvius. However, that's only in a pot. But we paskin that there are blias from food straight to food. So if you have apples from a compote in there, which are Kedusha Shvius, together with what's in your compote, cucumbers, and no, that's not normal. I don't know. I guess you put in your compote strawberries and whatever, all types of stuff. So now this apple, that's Kedusha Shvius. The strawberry also now is Kedusha Shvius, and you'll have to be shomer the strawberry, even though the strawberry came from Guatemala, Rabbi Isai. But you're going to have to be shomer this strawberry the same way you'll be shomer the apple. If you have leftover, you can't throw it out, and you got to make sure, put it in the Shmitta bach and let it rot, etc. Because there are blias when it comes. So now the shaila is very interesting shaila. Let's say I take cucumbers that are Kedusha Shvius, and I pickle them, which is a normal thing to do, so you're allowed to do it. I pickle them. And now I put them inside the vinegar. It's a normal thing. Now that juice, this is going to get really annoying. That juice, it's true, when I make a chicken soup and I put in there the pumpkin, which is Kedusha Shvius, the whole chicken soup is Kaddish. You got to eat every last drop. There's a little bit left on the bottom of the plate that the norm that you would just wash off. I don't mean chunks that you just throw out. A little bit left, schmutz, that you can wash off. But if you have a piece, you have to shomer b'shvius. If you have soup and there's a whole bowl left and nobody's eating it, you have to be shomer even the broth, Kedusha Shvius. What about if I pickle pickles or something like that, Kedusha Shvius cucumbers, and now I put them in the oil, I put them in the vinegar. So now is the vinegar Kedusha Shvius? Do I have to be shomer the vinegar? It's going to be very hard. What are you going to do? Are you going to pour it in the Shmitta? What are you going to do? So this, Rabbi Isai, is an interesting shaila. And again, we have a Rambam. The Rambam in Perek Vav in Machalas Asuras Halacha Ches Peres Shvius. That if they were in S'arev b'minam b'kol shuv v'shloi b'minam b'noi sein tam, even though they do, like I said in the chicken soup, give off time and make the chicken soup now kaddish b'kedusha shvius, but it's ein b'chlalas Torah and she'ein ataroives asura el chayiv lechol kol ataroives b'kedusha shvius. He says you have to be noy kedusha shvius. And then the Rambam goes on in Shmitta v'yovel in Perek Zayin Halacha Chabeis, and he says if you pickle something in wine, etc., it's the same thing. It gives off tam. It gives off tam. But the Rambam in Perek Hay in Shmitta Yovel Halacha Beis says a Mordek Gazach. He says din per shvius is the same dinim as trumas and meisers, like we mentioned before. As I bezayah baisai, since it's not the norm to eat or drink that vinegar. It's not the norm. And the norm of that vinegar is to throw out that vinegar after it's used. So therefore, it's not considered a hefset of the pri. And the derech normal, the darkai of a person is not to drink that juice. So therefore, he doesn't have to be noyig with it in Kedusha Shvius, and he could throw it out, an unbelievable kula. You take potatoes and you cook them in water. And then afterward, you want to spill out the water. Since that's the derech, you didn't do anything which isn't the derech, like we keep on saying. So therefore, you're allowed to eat those potatoes. The water, you're allowed to throw out. It only goes to things that it's normal to eat. So therefore, the potato juice, the pickle juice, you're going to be allowed to throw out. Mashenka in the soup, you're going to have to be noyig, b'kedusha shvius. So this is what Rabbi say. It's a big savior, as they say. It's our grace, a savior. I'm again weiter. Now I want to know. I can't hear.
What do you do with the extra chicken soup after Shabbos? What do you do with liquid like that?
At my table, they know during Shmita year, you only get soup if you finish it. And you tell me, kid, exactly what you're eating. Exactly. You want a tomato, you want a carrot, otherwise you're not getting dessert. That's what I do. You want to know what other people do? You're not mechuyev to put it back in the fridge. You're allowed to leave it. You're even allowed to take it out of the fridge. It's only a grama, and you let it sit there. I wouldn't put it straight in the sun, but you could put it outside, and then the sun will come tomorrow also. And then once it's sour, so then you could throw it out.
See, and the pot that's left over in the pot, you have to put it outside, leave it outside till it spoils, basically.
Yeah, and then the pot doesn't have blias, so there's no problem in the pot.
The same chalm pot as beans.
Yeah. The chalm pot, the potatoes, the beans, everything. Yeah. By us, You got to eat. You don't eat, no food. That's how, or no dessert. Normal. Next, a Yid comes, he says, hey, like a Shmitta wine. I want to use it for Havdalah. Shmitta wine. I want to use it for the Seder night. More Kedusha, mer Kedusha. Zah Shulchan. Hey, like a Shmitta wine. I don't know, everybody say, you got this Oitzer based in wine. It comes into the market in 2 or 3 years from now. Oitzer based in is 100% Kedusha Shvius. You might be allowed to sell it because they're not selling it to you. They're just charging you for the work, and the Beis Din's in charge, and nobody did any work over here. Great. It's going to be in the market in 2 or 3 years. You're going to buy a $100 bottle of wine for $50, for $40, because just the work, etc. Great. And now you say, I'll use it for the Seder. I don't know. Where I come from at the Seder, Dam, Eish, V'simrais Ashad, and Dam, Tzvadeya, Ditzach, Adash, Achab, stuff going all over. And we know all that little leftover juicelach over there, all that little, we know if you drink that, the face, your beard will fall off, your nose will fall off, the worst thing. So you're wasting Shmitta wine. Who gives you a right to do that? But what do you mean? It's a minute kaddish. Yeah, it's a minute kaddish, but it's la'achla v'loyla hefsid. Klape the fruit, it's not. You want to make Havdalah, great, but don't fill it up and overflow it. Elamai, you'll say, but it's only a trap. And I saw Rabbi Tzina B'Shoil, he wants to say maybe it's mutter, but I don't understand that. And all the poskim argue because they say, what a trap is if you left it and you ate in the derech of the normal way that you eat. But we know when we make Havdalah, we spill it over bedafka. And we know that when we do dam be'esh, we're bedafka taking it out. So you're not allowed to be mafsid be a dayan bedafka even one drop. It's if you have a drop left, so then that's called the sheris of Michael, and it's normal to just throw that out. And this is why don't use it at Leil Seder. Don't put out your fire into it's not a fire extinguisher. In a regular year, we let you do it. It's a minute kaddish. But in Shmitta wine shouldn't be used for that purpose. Shmitta wine should be drunk. If it spills over onto your plate, drink it if you made Havdalah with it. But don't bedafka spill it over, and certainly don't put your fire out into it. Legabe, taking oil of Shmitta and frying your schnitzel in it. So it depends. If you're frying it because you want the taste of the oil, great. That's how you use oil. But if you just want to put on the bottom a little bit so that it doesn't burn, oy vey, so then you're not using the Shmitta oil for food. You're using it as a fire extinguisher. You're not allowed. That's called le'afsid. If you want to use oil for Chanukah, I'm being asked over here. So pashtis is Hanedus halali koideshem. So it's kodesh k'zeh shava, yeah? No, because ein lanu rishus l'shtamish behem. Elo l'roisem bilvad. So you're not using it in a way where you can get a no. Mitzvahs lav lanis nitnu. So come to gain the place, and they say no way. But Shabbos candles you are allowed to, because Shabbos candles are for sure given for a no. For ket, you have to bedafka get a no from the Shabbos candles. Say bezai sikum tois. That you're dafka allowed to use menorah's oil, because you're getting a no at the time that's being burned, but not Chanukah licht, only Shabbos licht, not Chanukah licht, because you're not getting any no. I saw some place going to say Gewaltig Einfeld. They say, look, can I take wine and put it into a cake mix? You have a mix, a cake or whatever, and one of the ingredients is wine and Shmitta wine. So they say, look, about it's normal usage, right? But sometimes you put the wine in and you don't taste it, bichlal. So you just ruined the wine. You took something that had a taste and made it into something that you don't taste. Okay, maybe there's a makom to be makel if this is the normal thing that you do with wine. You have to see. I know that there's some that have a chumrah. I know that some have a chumrah that it doesn't matter the mice you ate it, Rabbi Leibovitz. It doesn't matter that the mice you ate it, because all the things that we're talking about, the mice you eat, when you take a potato and you eat it raw, you're also eating it, but that's not eating it in the way where you're getting the most normal tachlistic usage out of it. Now, by saying, the truth is, there's more. Wait, one moment, Rabbi say. Let's talk one moment before I get into these other cases over here. Giving to children is even a shaila. They say, who says you can give the kid? Everyone knows you take it, you put it on the kid, he takes it, he throws it on the floor. So I guess what you got to do when it comes to the kid is that, you're allowed to feed him. And even though he's going to make a mess and it's going to get ruined, that's also okay. And the little bits of sheris that are left, if it's a big thing, you got to put in the Shemitah pach. If it's a little thing, a schmutzy thing, you can just wash it off. But don't give it to a kid that the kid is in smash mode and giving it to him and he's throwing it right on the floor. Sometimes during the year, we don't think, we just give, he's about to smash it on the floor. During Shmitta, You got to make sure that you don't give it to him if he's going to smash it. If some of the stuff is going to get smashed, that's okay. That's okay. Now, Beisai, what about, are you allowed to take little tomatoes? Somebody just asked me this, Shiloh. Is he allowed to pick? He has a tomato patch, which it's a little complicated. It goes into a machlekes Rashi and the Rambam, that they have kedusha, but they're not svichim because they were planted from last year. So therefore they have kedusha, the Rash says, but they're not svichim. Sfardim hold that they're actually svichim. But let's say he has tomatoes which are kaddish b'kedusha shvius. So he said he wants to pick them when they're not fully ripe, because you pickle them when they're not fully ripe. So is that called hefsid? So even this rabbi said there's a Rambam, Nachamol Rambam, the Rambam in Perikei Hilchos Shmitta in Halachas Vav, ein oisvin peres shvius. When they're biced, you're not allowed to take unripened grapes off of the tree, because that's called you're ruining them. You're ruining them. The time that you eat them is when they're in their fullest form. So that's called ruining. But over here, I saw many achreinim, Rabbi Sion Abba Shoel, other achreinim, and they say over here, since if it's normal for you to take off the tomatoes and pickle them, and that's the derech normal, so then it goes back to the rest of the sugya that we've been talking about the whole time. So then that's going to be mutter. That's going to be mutter. Excuse me. Derech agav, by the Havdalah, what I mentioned before, I just want to tell you that comes from the Ridbaz. The Ridbaz in his Chibur and Pasha Shulkan and Simonei and Siv Test, he says, not the Havdalah, excuse me, the Chanukah. Ein l'shtamish b'shemen shvius ladlokas ner Chanukah. The kaven she'asa l'shtamish l'or ner Chanukah, that's called asa la'achla v'loy la'hefsid. You're not nana from the shemen. This is also brought in the Sefer Torah. So Aretz, and this is the Mekubal Dik Psak, that you can't use the oitzer based in wine. Sometimes a person in America, he sees oitzer based in wine. Now, how exactly they got oitzer based in wine and oil to America? Another headache. How are you allowed to do that? You're not supposed to bring Perish Shvius to America. You're not supposed to sell Perish Shvius to Goyim. There's lots of halachas over here that you have to figure out like exactly how that happened. You're not supposed to be Moitzi Perish Shvius to Chutz La'aretz. But let's say he comes to Chutz La'aretz and he sees over there's a bottle of oil and it says on it Oitzer Based in. Don't use it for Chanukah Licht. You want to use it for Ner Shabbos? Gesundheit. Gesundheit. Now, boy, say it's something very important to know that, the fruits at this point of the year are usually, I'm speaking the whole time about fruits, usually the fruits at this point of the year are not shaykh at all to be Perish Shvius, because most of them, the chanata, right, the blossoming, if the pears are here now in the beginning of the winter, they blossomed last year. So they're called perishishis. If somebody comes in and takes my pomegranates now, he might go out without fingers, verstehst? Because it's not hefka, my pomegranates. My pomegranates are my pomegranates. In the 8th year, ironically, my pomegranates are going to have grown in the 7th year. So next year, when he wants to come and take my pomegranates, I'm going to say, Gesundheit, come on over. Avada, you can take my pomegranates. It's important to know what we're talking about over here. One more nakuda, Rabbi say, we didn't get so much of a chance to talk about over here, which is the selling aspect, which I guess what's most negay, especially the chevra in Chutz La'aretz, is when it comes to you're not allowed to sell Perish Shvius. So what am I going to do about an esrog? So we're going to have to talk maybe a different time, maybe next year more, that there's a concept known as havlah, and I could say I'm buying the lulav and you're throwing me in a matana of the esrog, and that's an eitzah that comes from the Gemara. And the truth is, it's another eitzah. It's the Toisus and Avodah Zarah and Daf Samach Beis that brings the re. That there's another eitzah to buy Perish Shvius, where if I'm not buying it, I'm borrowing it, kivyachol, you're giving it to me, and now I'm borrowing money from you, and that's called behakofeh, and that's like a check or a credit, etc. This year, you got to get a credit card in Eretz Yisrael. So then credit doesn't have the problem necessarily of buying. So for example, Toisus, the re brings down an eitzah. He says, look, Toisus Avodah Zarah, Samach Beis, he says, you'll give the esrog, I'll take the esrog, right? And that's already a mashicha. That's already a mashicha, and then I'll pay with a check, the chadaima. Which again, I think these things, that part we'll talk about, I think, a little bit more next year. Now, Amaisa, basically on this chelik of the shir, I'm basically done, and that's why I see my time is very close to done. Also, I wanted to just mention one nekuda from in 3 minutes from what we spoke about last week, which I want to just explain, because I feel a little bit that I didn't give both studim. We spoke at the end of the shir about the gvulas of Eretz Yisrael. I want to just give you a little food for thought to think about. Last week, I told you it's not clear where Eretz Yisrael is. Eretz Yisrael goes from where to where. And the big shaila is really on the bottom of Eretz Yisrael. Exactly where is Eretz Yisrael? In other words, where's the ending point of Eretz Yisrael? Does Eretz Yisrael end a little bit after Beersheba? Or does Eretz Yisrael end all the way down by Yatvasa? And I mentioned last week that Rav Elyashiv said that you have to be machmir from 30 to 35. The latitude of 30 to 35, which basically it's a big chiddush, because it means that from Yatvasa under till Eilat, so that's not Eretz Yisrael, but everything else is at least Suffolk Eretz Yisrael, and that we exposed last week is called the Arava, the Upper Arava, the Arava Tzfoni. And that's the big fight. The Badatz is Mekel, a lot on that Shaila, and Rav Elyashiv we saw was Machmer. I just want to mention one thing that you could think about. The truth is that there you have to give something over here. Everyone should take out a map of Eretz Yisrael. You know how Eretz Yisrael looks, and go now to the eastern side of Eretz Yisrael. You know, there's the Kinneret, there's the Jordan, and then there's the Yam HaMelech on the bottom. And then on the bottom, it continues all the way down, that whole area over there, all the way toward Eilat. The Torah Kedosha in Parshas Masai seems to say mefurish that the Gvul Negvi, the Gvul Negev, the southern border of Eretz Yisrael, is Yam HaMelech. If the southern border is Yam HaMelech, so then b'chayra, I could understand if when you're making the line, because we have rayas that the line doesn't go straight across. I can understand that when you're making the line to get to the west side. I can understand you go a little bit down. I can understand you go on a 10-degree angle. I can understand a 20-degree angle, 30-degree, maybe even a 40-degree angle. And I understand that, like, when someone would want to say, where's the southern gvul? You could say the southern gvul starts by Yam HaMelech, and then it turns toward Mitzrayim. But Rabbi say, if you're going to say that the southern gvul of Eretz Yisrael, that Yam HaMelech, now you have to take a line and drop down and then make a left turn. So then what way is Yam HaMelech considered the southern border? It should be called the eastern border. And the Torah doesn't say that. That's a kasha. That's one of the reasons why the Eidach Harei, this is machmir on the Arava. Now, by say there are answers to these questions because there are so many sfeikis and what the Oile Bavel captured and what the Oile Mitzrayim captured. And it's not clear how we make the line. And once it's not clear how we make that line, and once we have the Kafter Beferach, that's between 30 and 35. But I just feel like last week when I said over to Tut Tzadim, I didn't give credence to the other tzads. I just want you to know this is the other tzad. The Maisa, Rechaim, Rav Elyashiv, they're mad. Rechaim Kaniyaski, he's machmir on this shaila of what's called the Arava. And Rabbi say, you're definitely Mekayim with Hidur Rav, not being Amaroritz. And now we could be moister to you, Paris Shvius. And Tosis told us, oh, thank you for the calendar. That's that for the map. Very good. So you take a look at Rabbi say, go to where Yam HaMelech is. And it's true, maybe Yam HaMelech is not exactly as I see it's a very, very Palestinian-oriented map over here. But I see that Lemaisa, even if you want to say that Yam HaMelech has slightly, niskaten, if even the olives are smaller and the eggs are smaller, so Yam HaMelech is smaller. But just if I'm going to drop down, I would need to make a somewhere left turn. You can't see my finger what I'm doing over here, but I would go like that. But to say that it goes straight down, so that we should call Yam HaMelech not the southern border. We should call Yam HaMelech the eastern border. And the Torah says not like that. It says Negba, and then it goes Kedma. But it's something to think about. Something to think about. And you are clearly not Amarotzim now. And now we can be moisted to Perish Fias. Now, Vaisal Zayich Zayin Taka, that you're going to come to Eretz Yisrael, and we're going to have the Achikal over here, and we're going to eat those Perish Fias together. Bez is Hashem.
Okay, and point here, let's start first link at the map. Where exactly is this Arava section that the Rav is referred to?
Okay, so over here, go under Beersheba. Go under Beersheba.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Could you see my icon when I do it or no? Only I see it. You don't see that, right?
Only you see it, yeah.
Okay, so go under Beersheba, right where your arrow is. Now, keep going down a little bit. Keep going down a little bit. Till about here, Berach, till around there, a little higher, till around there. Most everybody that came out is going to be machmir. That's called Eretz Yisrael. Even maybe a little bit higher than that. I'll be honest with you, a little bit higher than that. Okay. Now the fight.
What are the cities around there? What is around there?
So, for example, for example, Tifrach is around there. Dimona is probably around there. I don't see over here on the map, but I'll tell you that probably Tifrach is around there, and probably Dimona.
This is a Palestinian map. It doesn't show our cities here. You got to get it.
Okay,
we get the picture. We get the picture.
And then if you drop down,
about Machtesh Rimon, somewhere around there, something like that.
Basically, now if you drop down, does it show you latitude on this map? Then we could see Rav Elyashiv. Rav Elyashiv is about 30, but it doesn't give you latitude. This map, no, it doesn't give you latitude. But Akopanim, if you drop down till about latitude, where Yatavata is.
This way. You mean the curve?
Yeah.
This way?
Yeah, basically.
So according to them, Gaza is
no. So Gaza and the Gaza, everyone is going to have to be chayshish because we have a suffix where Az is, and clearly the line is not going to. Nobody could take a chrayas to say Ashkelon. On the Ashkelon is considered. There was this year a certain extra that brought in, and it was called Oile Mitzrayim, and that Baruch Hashem was taken out of the market extremely quickly because that was mamish a Tayas Gedoyla, and they were saying that Eretz Yisrael is above Gaza, where your icon is, and that's mamish aleit sanas, that anybody could take a chrayas and say, I know where on the western side Eretz Yisrael is. That's mamish aleit sanas, because that was always machlekes throughout the whole entire history of the Jewish people, the Renbaz and the Mabit and everybody, what's Gaza, what's Ashkelon. And, I don't think anybody wants to say out loud that, no, we're wrong. Gaza is not a part of Eretz Yisrael also. So the Mela, all the years, they were always machmer on the parts on Gaza, above Gaza, that's clearly on the western Negev, clearly a part of Eretz Yisrael. The only machlekes were more on the eastern side and in the middle.
So produce maza does not help us at all whatsoever. Everybody
right, definitely not.
So all the stuff they bought from Maza over the years, that was all hydroponics related.
100%, and that was with Rav Elyashiv's kula. That since they had plastic on the greenhouses, and it was an atzet she'ein nakev, and it was sold to goyim, and it was in a house. All that together, Rav Elyashiv was making, and that's what Rav Efrati said on today.
Rav Efrati told us this.
Rav Efrati will be saying on that in the rest of Eretz Yisrael. I eat that in my house, and I don't know you could that because shvius.
Okay, I think what's going to happen here, Rav, we are trying to update you very hard to come and take Eretz Yisrael together as a group, working on that, working our way up the ladder. And before we come, I think that the shir was, of course, Gedarcha B'Kodesh, brilliant Lumdus wise. Well, the mice are going to have to get a primer on what to do. Because I assume we're going to have to pick a hechsher, depending if we do it together or not. We're going to have to pick a methodology, but people are going to buy oranges in the store. They don't know what to do. So we'll have to figure out to get some way to chazer all this, so we can't know what to do. Since, as you said earlier, this is strange to us.
I'll be there to help you. No problem.
Yeah, Shikayach, and also we will do better and get a more Eretz Yisraelic oriented map next time. And not this Arabic. Thank you very much.
Another two cities that you might have heard of are Nitivot and Ofakim. They're also in this Suffolk area or whatever.
And they were machmer on that, right?
And so the Badatz is Mako and Rav Elyashiv is machmer.
Lamaisa Chanukah lecht. Somebody shows Chanukah. Lamaisa, what's the methodology there? You're buying olive oil.
If you're using oitzer based in oil, then definitely not. Only for the shamish.
Definitely not. And if you're using, or if you're using Yivol Nachri, also definitely not. And if you're using Paris Eretz Yisrael, Kedusha Shmitta.
Yeah. So then you're not allowed. Ein lanu rishos l'shtamish ben.
Ein rishos l'shtamish ben. Okay, so yeah, basically when it comes to Chanukah lech, you have to be very careful what oil you're buying. That's the bottom line.
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, don't get all excited. It says oitzer based, then I'll use it for Chanukah. Kevin the asa mitzvah, I'll do another mitzvah.